Reality.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Thank you, Nighthawk, and welcome back to Dave and Mackie's Shiny Side Out. That's right. 528, was it? 820 and 500? That's just
529.
29, that's what I said. Oh, you're not listening. 920 and 500, thank you, sir.
Let me clean my ears, Aaron.
I know. Thank you so much for listening all these years, everybody, and continuing to listen, and maybe some new listeners, so we'd like to say hi to you. Today we're going to continue on prophecy. Now, this is actually a subject we have never, ever tackled, ever. But recently I've been reading up on a few things, and I was startled, to say the least.
Startled?
To see just how accurate. Now, obviously, always with the advantage of hindsight. Now, for me, hindsight, right? How accurate some of these prophecies actually have been. And it is really something that is important, for us to consider. Now, my brother just pinged me, Dave, and he said it's dead air. That can't be true, right?
No, it can't be true.
Okay, because we are on here. Maybe it's just dead for him. No, so they cut my brother off.
I'll confirm that.
Yeah, they cut my brother's internet off. I told you to pay the bills, didn't I? Didn't I tell you? Hey,
that'll learn him.
That'll learn him. Yeah. So prophecies again. Well, we have obviously dealt into the metaphysical significance.
Revolution.
And many good friends of the show are very much spiritually aware and what you would call probably spirit warriors in many ways. I think, Solaris, who's awesome, I would classify best probably as a spirit warrior. We have never really looked at prophecy. Didn't I tell you? But no, you just said all good. It was all him.
Yeah, we are live.
We are live indeed. It is. And we looked at a number of different prophecies here. The one that I found astounding was Mother Shipton. Now, we've discussed with you at length that Mother Shipton, obviously, it could have been a hoax perpetrated in the 1850s, because she lived in the 1650s, 1660s, etc., and then she was meant to have been burned at the stake. People aren't really quite yet in agreement as to whether or not she actually existed, right? But okay, so let's say she didn't exist, and let's say that this was a hoax. Then you look at these prophecies and you go, oh, they're all a hoax. Yes, but a hoax that was perpetrated in 1850. 1850. So forget the hoax bit.
It doesn't matter. That's right.
Right? Yeah. So it's the same. It should be the same still, Dave.
But last week I think there was an update or something. I forget.
Oh, I think so.
Just ignore me.
That's all good. But what I can't remember is where we are up to. That's the one. I know we did that case, but the point is that Mother Shipton's prophecies, if they come from 1650 or 1850, that is almost irrelevant, because you need to look at the content. And if this prophecy were from 1850, for argument's sake, so it is a hoax, then it reveals astounding insight into what was going to happen in the world. And we discussed this at length, right? So how do you reconcile these facts? Well, the answer is you can't, right? You cannot. But we did share this with you at length, and we did share Edgar Cayce and the Earth Changes with you as well. I think where we're up to.
We talked about the Akashic Record.
Yes, we did. Did we talk about astrology? Normally I highlighted it. I can't remember why I didn't highlight it. Let's start with astrology. Why don't we? And you, my friend, why don't you treat this to your dulcet tones?
Dulcet. That's never ever described that way. Edgar Cayce, there you go. That's why Edgar Cayce's view of astrology was based on the concept of reincarnation. He felt that it was not the positions of the planet that influence the soul at birth, but that the soul chooses the time in which it wishes to be born. Most of us, according to Cayce, have had lives before this one, and we bring with us talents, abilities, and influences from those past lives. These influences, part of the universal law of cause and effect, are called karma in Sanskrit. Cayce also tells us not only that we have had previous lives, but that between lifetimes, the soul has a life outside the physical world. I'm getting deja vu here, so maybe we did. During these interim periods, the soul experiences levels of consciousness that correspond to the vibratory levels of the different planets. Casey referred to these interim lifetime experiences as planetary sojourns because we have had experiences with the vibrations of the different planets between lifetimes. The planets have an internal influence on us when we reincarnate into the earth plane. We have read this, I swear. The influences of the planets are felt by us in the form of inclinations, tendencies, and urges. However, Casey said, no influence is greater than the human will and the choices we make in our lives every day. Not that there are not definite helps to be attained from astrology, but those who live by the more often are controlled rather than controlling their own lives and destinies. Astrology is a fact in most instances, but astrological aspects are but signs and symbols. No influence is of greater value or the greater help than the will of an individual. And that last one came from reading 815-6.
Yeah, and he had many, many readings over his lifetime, tens of thousands. And this is really an important component point that they've raised. And if we've discussed it before, it bears mentioning again. My grandmother, who was very much an adherent of astrology and wrote her own charts, which is a whole science in and of itself. Oh yeah, she also did, anyway, she did a whole bunch of stuff. But the point is, she said, the stars in German, she said, die Sterne beugen sich, sie zwingen nicht, which means the stars will lean or bend, toward you, or away from you, as it were, but they will never force you. So we're living in a field of probabilities in quantum speak, and there are likely outcomes of a situation, and there are less likely outcomes of a situation, and that's the nature of, it seems, of the reality we are inhabiting. That seems to be one of the basic tenets of our reality, a field of probabilities, and some are more likely, and others are less likely, but they're never forced upon us. It seems there seems to be, at the very least, a small modicum of free choice that is available to us, right? More likely outcomes, yes. Less likely outcomes, yes. But ultimately, we are the creators of our potential futures, right? And that's something that I never forget, that she always was quite adamant about. And the other thing that Casey spent a lot of time on in his readings, believe it or not, was Atlantis. And he had a few readings, and he also said that Atlantis, and we're going to come to this, but it would be discovered. But I'll share that with you here. The landmass, the size of Atlantis was equal to that of Europe, including Asia in Europe. So the Asian part of the Asia Minor, like Turkey, for example, right? He saw visions of a continent which had gone through three major periods of division. The first two, about 15,600 before the Common Era, so about 13,000 years before Christ, if you will, when the mainland was divided into islands. The three main islands Casey named Poseida, Og, and Arion. Atlantean souls. Many people living today are the reincarnations of Atlantean souls who must now face similar temptations as before. Bluestone. Casey may or may not have predicted the coming of a certain bluestone of Atlantean origin that was found to be on an island in the Caribbean and was to have the power to heal. In 1974, a volcanic blue pectolite, now known as the Larima, was found in the Dominican Republic. Now, I have done no research into this stone at all, but I will, as of right now. Crystals. And this is really interesting because a lot of researchers have postulated over time, as well as Dave and I, that previous civilizations probably did not use the same kind of power or technology that we do today. That's why we're not finding iPads in the desert or or internal combustion engines necessarily, because it was a different way that technology went, which makes sense, right? I mean, if you look at nature itself, not as an entity, but you look at the problem of flight. In nature, flight was solved as a problem many different ways. Like insects and birds fly in completely different ways.
That's true.
Bats, right? Yeah, bats are different yet again. And plants fly different yet again, especially seed material, right? If you're familiar with the dandelions, you know the little flower, yellow flower that turns into like this puffy little thing, and when the wind you blow on it, looks like a little parachute man, right?
Yeah, seed
spreader. It isn't. Yeah, exactly, seed spreader. So the problem of flight was solved many different ways. So the problem of technology and technological advancement and power sources, etc., could have gone in a very different way for us as well. I mean, for all the advancements that we've had, we've said this many times as well before, we're still in the steam age. That's where we are. You don't believe me? You go to your nuclear power plant and you see what a nuclear power plant produces. They don't produce energy out of nuclear reactions. They're producing
steam.
That's steam, baby. Yeah,
it's a steam engine.
It's a steam engine. It's a really, really big and dangerous steam engine. Our steam engines haven't become less dangerous. They've become more dangerous.
So that's a fission reaction, which is breaking atoms apart, and
Correct.
A fusion reaction is going to again not create energy by fusion, but rather heating up water as steam and then making another steam engine.
We are stuck with the steam, I guess, right? No, and that's not a bad thing. Steam is good because a lot of water, right? But there are other ways of. I mean, we know there's talk about 0-point energy and a whole bunch of other stuff. Maybe get your energy from the quantum form that I postulate. But the Atlanteans were meant to have used giant laser-like crystals for power plants, right? And that these had been responsible for the second destruction of the land. In metaphysical circles, this colored gemstone is said to have healing powers. As with most crystals and gemstones, now these are the Atlantean crystals, right? There is no scientific evidence that it has any special properties. The final destruction was in part due to the overcharging of the crystal, which caused a massive explosion. Casey blamed the final destruction on the disintegration of the Atlantean culture through greed and lust. So not too far from where we are today, right?
Oh.
But before the legendary land disappeared under the waves, Casey believed there was an exodus of many Atlanteans through Egypt and further afield. Casey attributed history's Great Flood in part to the sinking of the last huge remnants of Atlantis. Now, I have my own theories on this, which are not too far away from that. And we've discussed with you the Great Flood at length. It still is the longest show notes that we've ever written. But ultimately, some 15 or 16,000 years ago from today, something happened. And a lot of evidence in the world exists today still that points to that, right? Not least of which Puma Punku and Tiahuanaco, which by some, which are now called crazy and unscientific, has been dated to exactly that time, or the destruction at the very least has been dated to that time.
And very similarly all around the world, the Tools Down event from the monolithic era of construction.
100% correct. 100%.
And also the Badlands in the US, the melting of the North American ice cap.
Yes.
A glacier, which
yes.
There also the disruption to the Sahara, where we're talking so many things around the globe all go back to an event that is only now. Was it the Permian? I forget whatever the transition. I'll get it before the phrase is finished.
Yeah.
All of those events go back to then. All of the stories predate that event. All of the ancient stories. There's some that go back further.
Yeah.
What we're
And then
talking about was a global flood at around about the same time too.
Yeah, and make no mistake, this is a global phenomenon. So we looked at this in some detail, especially. I mean, we looked at comparative mythologies because I mean that's as far back as we can go in time, right? We can't go any further as far as human knowledge transmission is concerned, anyway. And then we looked at the flood myth specifically, and while you could argue there's a lot of cultural transference, right? So Christian missionaries and all this wonderful stuff. There are a lot of I guess instances of specific things and differences as well of these different flood myths that speak to the fact that these were events witnessed by the people in that area of the world. They are not a culturally transmitted phenomenon, right? This is really important to understand. Because we're saying here that no, it wasn't just the Christian missionaries that brought these flood stories to the rest of the world. The rest of the world already had them. The Egyptians had them, the Maya, the South Americans, and a whole bunch of other people as well in the world had them. And the differences in them are quite astounding. The way they survived.
That's right.
When they emerged. The Hopi said, well,
how they describe the ordeal and
Yeah.
also not just the emergence, Becky, but also the survival techniques.
yes,
Or
absolutely.
what took the children.
Yes,
It was about the children's survival.
that is correct. That is absolutely correct. So it is essentially showing us that these people had a memory, as it were, it seems, of this event, independent of any Christian missionaries that might have come along at some point, in their collective past. But anyway, that's not today's show. He talks about Atlantis rising as well. And Casey most specifically timed forecast was that Atlantis would rise again in 1968 or 1969. Now, he was wrong about that in as much as that Atlantis did not emerge from the waves. However, it was in that time frame, right, that the Bimini Road was located in the Atlantic Ocean, which was found, well, in Bimini. And this is a road that leads into the ocean, like big cobblestones leading into the ocean. Okay, and a lot of people point to that as saying, no, here you go. I mean, this is a remnant of Atlantis. Okay, and it is interesting that Casey said, well, one of the destructions that Atlantis went through in its existence, was the deluge. In fact, the last one it went through was a massive global deluge. But look up Bimini Road on your own and have a look. Have a look what it says there. Charles Berlitz wrote extensively on that subject. Dave? What does Edgar Cayce tell us about ancient mysteries?
I'm not gonna disrespect the people with my accent. Okay, so Edgar Cayce on Ancient Mysteries. Edgar Cayce claimed that the history of humankind went back some 10 million years. While in a trance state, Cayce's ability to peer into the past with uncanny psychic accuracy was demonstrated repeatedly. This type of psychic ability is called retrocognition. And Cayce used retrocognition when giving readings that accessed and spoke of the past events in an individual's life as well as ancient history, including the geological evolution of the planet and details of civilizations that predate recorded history. Through the use of retrocognition, the Cayce readings provide a wealth of insights into the ancient world. Although much of this material may be impossible to verify, sometimes contemporary research uncovers evidence to confirm the information given in Cayce's trance state. Here are just a handful of ancient mysteries Cayce's readings uncovered. Becky, we can alternate, I think.
Okay, sure. You start. Yeah.
The Essenes.
Essenes, that's it.
More than 11 years before the Dead Sea Scrolls were found in 1947, Edgar Cayce provided a great deal of information on a Jewish sect called Essenes. Cayce claimed that in Essene society, men and women lived and worked together towards a common goal of preparing for the birth of Christ. Scholars, however, believe that the Essenes were a monastic society composed exclusively of men. It was not until archaeological excavations occurred after Cayce's death that his psychic information was verified.
Oh yeah. The life of Jesus. No, not that we're stepping on any toes here. Going beyond the New Testament and given before the discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls, Cayce's readings reveal the life of Jesus as one rich in teachings, training with the Essenes and his teachers his teacher there, Judy, his family, brothers James and Jude, and sister Ruth, and spiritual lessons, traveling to India and Egypt to learn from master teachers. The readings go a step further and reveal the past lives of Jesus that led to the culmination of his manifestation as the Christ, and advise us on how we can pattern our life after his. Now, before you start poo-pooing this, right, there is nothing that we know about Jesus between the ages of 12 and 30. That's 18 years. And even in ancient times, that's enough time, well enough time, to travel to India, Egypt, and elsewhere.
That's absolutely true. Well, there's a nice segue about Egypt, ancient Egypt. In about 1200 readings on Egypt, Cayce reveals the origin, purpose, and prophecies of the Great Pyramid and the Sphinx, also ancient rulers, and Cayce's own past life as the priest Ra-Ta, who wanted to unify the spiritual teachings of the people. Cayce's precognitive readings also revealed a lush landscape along the Nile and stated that the Nile had changed its course and once entered the Atlantic Ocean. Then, in italics, the Nile entered into the Atlantic Ocean. What is now the Sahara was an inhabited land and very fertile. What is now the central portion of this country, or the Mississippi Basin, was then all in the ocean. Only the plateau was existent, or the regions that are now portions of Nevada, Utah, and Arizona formed the greater part of what we know as the United States. Edgar Cayce readings 364-13. This theory seems to be confirmed as an article published in Science, August 1986, reported that shuttle imaging radar from the space shuttle had discovered previously unknown river valleys beneath the driest part of the Sahara. Through satellite imaging and on-site archaeological investigations, it appears as though the present-day Nile had changed its course, once following across the Sahara through Africa and into the Atlantic Ocean.
Yeah, I know. It's quite something if you think about it, right?
Good on him.
I know. Again, there's something else on Atlantis here. According to Cayce, Atlantis was a highly advanced civilization located from the Gulf of Mexico to Gibraltar. So it spanned, obviously, the Atlantic Ocean. Edgar Cayce referred to Bimini as one of the mountaintops of ancient Atlantis. Before the end of the last ice age, about 12,000 years ago, the ocean levels were at least 300 feet below their current levels. That's 100 meters. That's a lot. A vast island was in the area in those remote times, rather than chains of islands. Though the island does not appear to be a mountain today, 12,000 years ago it was one of the highest points of the vast land formation in that region. Through destructive misuse of advanced technology, Atlantis was destroyed over a period of thousands of years, with the final catastrophic event circa 10,000 BC, or about 12,000 years ago. Over its years of destruction, Atlanteans migrated to other parts of the world, including ancient Egypt and the Yucatan Peninsula, where they brought with them their technological advancements, beliefs, and recorded history.
Now, the Hall of Records. According to the readings, the people of Atlantis became aware of the fact that their civilization was about to be destroyed. As a result, they hid identical records of the Atlantean civilization in Bimini, in Egypt, and in the Yucatan. In those periods, this is his reading, in those periods when the first change had come in the position of the land, there had been an egress of peoples from the Atlantean land, and they built a city near the edge of the Sahara. Edgar Cayce readings 5748-6. And now 2012-1. The one in the Atlantean land that sank, which will rise and is rising again, another in the place of the records that leadeth from the Sphinx to the Hall of Records in the Egyptian land, and another in the Orion or Yucatan land, where the temple there is overshadowing same. Numerous readings contend that his Hall of Records will be discovered. He says in 378-16, a record of Atlantis from the beginnings and the developments of the peoples throughout their sojourn, with the record of the first destruction and the changes that took place in the land. It's all there.
Yeah, look, and we do know that halls of records, or a hall of record has been found. We don't know what has been found in the Yucatan, if anything, or in Bimini for that matter. But certainly we know that something has been found in or near the Sphinx. And I think you have to be living under a rock if you haven't heard, or at least are aware of the theory that the Sphinx, as well as the temple complex at Luxor, well predate the last ice age. So very, very old indeed. In fact, geological evidence, this is hard science now, right? Hard geological science tells us that the Sphinx is very, 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 very old indeed. Right? Thousands of years older, in fact, than what we would have, or what we've been told so far. But again, not acceptable, because the parasites don't want to know us. They don't want us to know the truth. Which brings us to the next section here, and this is these are 7 prophecies that are yet to come. Edgar Cayce's prophecies that have yet to materialize, and they're really interesting, especially in the light of some of the shows we've brought to you over the years. The first one here is, will our lifespan as human beings be extended? Ooh. what a minefield that is. Now, this is what Edgar Cayce had to say. Now, we know that humans are now living longer than at the time of Edgar Cayce, but his readings seem to indicate that a healthy human lifespan would extend years beyond of that which we are currently living, well beyond. Now, this is what he said in reading 244-2. Now, we find there are many changes in the body since we have had this many for good. Many of the organs and the conditions show the changes as come about by the natural or so-called natural conditions in changes as the body succumbs to the effects of age or usage in the system. Much of this may be overcome. Man should live much longer than has been ordinarily given, and will. The effects of age or usage in the system, the shortening of, now this is I'm talking, not it's me talking here, right? The shortening of your telomere chains, the switching off or on of telomerase, as it were. And here he says, well, yeah, and the truth of the matter is that scientists are now looking at this. I love to read science fiction, Dave, right? Yeah. And a lot of the science fiction that I read these days is usually from more recent authors, because I've written all the masters and all the classics. And they're all, to a man and a woman, when it comes to talking about life extension and immortality, to a person, they talk about telomere therapy. All right? Every last one of them. So it's definitely a theme that has permeated our culture. So this is certainly very interesting. All yours, my friend.
Okay, so this is perhaps.
Yes, that's the one, my friend. Absolutely, 100%.
Perfect. We will discover the design for a self-fueling perpetual motion machine. Perhaps with the current focus on renewable resources and energy conservation. That's very funny. Because the conservation of energy is the entire purpose of most of the debunking, because you lose something. I continue the text. We will see this next prophecy come to pass in our lifetimes. The quote here is, "You will have before you glassless motor invented by," and it says 4666. Edgar Casey, yes, we have the body and inquiry mind of, and I'm not sure what 4666 means.
I'll double check it.
Must be a reference. Also, the associations and those conditions surrounding the perfection of motor which will develop power in its own action, as has been given. The idea and the plans as been worked out in part along those lines that pull more of the power as produced in compression in drum, with the leads made in these forms that gather vibrations from the air as is forced through drum, are, as we find, the better application of the created energy. In the cams have been used too much slack or play is allowed in their rotation. This is in the drum's head action that these must be shortened in play. The connection of, and it says 195 and 900, they're obviously prophecies, with same, best that these have 4666's operations closer under the observations when completed product is near attained. Question: how may we bring him under our observation? Answer: bring him to ... Ohio or New York. That's very, very interesting, Mackie. Because did you know that the car that runs on water went across from LA to New York?
Oh, did it?
Yeah. Stanley Meyer's device. Question, is this machine the same as brought to Washington now by Lindbergh? That was Charles Lindbergh. Answer: no. As is here, the 4666 machine would operate on stationary conditions, impelling forces, even for now, that in gas motors, as tested by others, has more to do with that thrown in air and gaining its impelling force from that source. Question: would it operate perpetually if perfected? Answer: not perpetually, but once started, could be kept in motion by created energy of its own source. Other has to have source of impellation. Edgar Casey reading 4665-1. So that would imply that 4666 was the other reading.
Absolutely. Which brings us to the conflict in the Persian Gulf. Now, for us, ancient history to some extent. We'll just see what else he had to say about this. And this is him talking. As is understood by many, in the earth manifestation and the cycle of time, much repeats itself. There are still influences indicated in the lives of groups, banded as nations, banded as people, still influenced by those happenings. What then, ye ask, is the influence that makes for this great change that may be expected? The powers of light and darkness, as then, as 1600 years before, as in those periods, so today, we find nation against nation, the powers of death, destruction, the wrecking of that which has been and is held near and dear to the hearts of those who have, through one form or another, set ideals. These are not to be questioned, in that as may be helpful, maybe a helpful force, but what is coming to pass, and how may ye, as individuals, help? Strifes will arise through the period. Watch for them near Davis Strait in the attempts there for the keeping of the lifeline to a land open. Watch for them in Libya and in Egypt, in Ankara and in Syria, through the straits about those areas above Australia, in the Indian Ocean and the Persian Gulf. Edgar Casey, reading 3976 and 26. Obviously, these are nexus points for conflict that he just described there.
Absolutely. Is a new root race evolving? Good question. The Edgar Casey information suggests that humanity's consciousness has evolved and expanded over time. Casey stated that this expansion of consciousness could be viewed throughout the Bible, from Genesis to Revelation. From the reading's perspective, the next great evolution would be tied to the development of what Casey termed the fifth root race, an evolutionary occurrence that would mark a new age and a new understanding of humanity's relationship to God. When a 52-year-old construction engineer asked about this expanding consciousness in 1942, Casey commented that each individual had to essentially work with personal soul development in order to resonate to the new consciousness. You expect a new root race. What are you doing to prepare for it? You must prepare food for their bodies as well as their minds and their spiritual development. Edgar Casey, reading 470-35. 10 years earlier, during a reading on the Great Pyramid in Egypt, Casey suggested that an ancient hall of records would be discovered at a time signifying the manifestation of this new level of consciousness. And that was Edgar Casey, reading 5748-6.
The next question then naturally leads to, will the three halls of records be discovered? Now, according to the readings, the people of Atlantis became aware of the fact that their civilization was about to be destroyed. As a result, they hid identical records of the Atlantean civilization in Bimini, in Egypt, and in the Yucatan. Numerous readings contend that this hall of records will be discovered, including: question, give in detail what the sealed room contains. Answer, that is Edgar Casey, reading 378-16. A record of Atlantis from the beginnings of those periods when the spirits took form or began the encasements in that land, and the developments of the peoples throughout their sojourn, with the record of the first destruction and the changes that took place in the land. This in position lies as the sun rises from the waters, the line of the shadow or light falls between the paws of the Sphinx, that was later set as the sentinel or guard, and which may not be entered from the connecting chambers from the Sphinx's paw, right paw, until the time has been fulfilled when the changes must be active in this sphere of man's experience. Between then, the Sphinx and the river. Edgar Casey, like I said, 378-16. Question, in which pyramid or temple are the records mentioned in the readings given through this channel on Atlantis in April 1932? Answer, as given, that temple was destroyed at the time there was the last destruction in Atlantis. So that would have been some 14,000 years ago. Yet, as time draws nigh, when changes are to come about, there may be the opening of those three places where the records are one to those that are the initiates in the knowledge of the one God. The temple by Iltar will then rise again. Also, there will be the opening of the temple or hall of records in Egypt, and those records that were put into the heart of the Atlantean land may also be found there, that have been kept for those that are of that group. The records are one, says Edgar Casey in reading 5750-1.
What is the shape of the world to come? Decades before the rest of the world was thinking about the enormous impact that China would have upon the global stage, Edgar Casey predicted great things for China and its people. On one occasion, Casey told a group of people that eventually China would become the cradle of Christianity. as applied in the lives of men. Edgar Cayce reading 3976-29. This suggests the personal application of spiritual principles would become paramount to the Chinese people. Cayce then went on to caution that it would take a long time to manifest, but that it was the country's destiny. Yeah, it is far off as man counts time, but only a day in the heart of God, for tomorrow China will awake. On another occasion, when a 36-year-old book publisher asked about the destiny of China in 1943, just prior to his own trip to the country to serve in a capacity of a missionary, Cayce promised amazing changes in the country that would lead to more democracy and greater religious freedom. He also suggested that eventually the height of civilization would move from the West to the Chinese people, and quoted, "And these will progress for civilization moves west." Edgar Cayce reading 2834-3.
Now, this is really interesting, especially when it comes to the awakening bits here, because it's the Falun Gong movement that is most closely associated with what we would call, I guess, the Cathars, or the true adherents to the people that actually understood what was going on in the world, right? And the Falun Gong movement is very, very similar. They have very similar belief systems, and that's why they're deemed so dangerous by the Chinese government. They're the most persecuted group, not ethnically based. This is a belief system. And if you don't know about it, I urge you to look it up and understand it. But the Communist Party sees them as a direct and existential threat to the party. Okay, that is 100% true. Okay, which brings us to, will there be a second coming? Now, obviously, Cayce lived in a Christian country, was born and lived as a Christian. So this question, I guess, was inevitable. The Cayce readings had much to say about the life of Jesus, covering the lost years that were never addressed in the Bible. But Cayce also spoke of Jesus' return. And here's an excerpt on that subject from reading 262-49. What is meant by the day of the Lord is near at hand? Is the question. The answer? That, as has been promised through the prophets and the sages of old, the time and half-time has been and is being fulfilled in this day and generation, and that soon there will again appear in the earth that one through whom many will be called to meet those that are preparing the way for his day in the earth. The Lord then will come, even as ye have seen him go. Unfortunately, that's probably one of the least clear prophecies I've ever come across in my time, because I have absolutely no idea what it means. Okay? So, is it coming? Maybe. I want to give it a firm maybe, Dave.
A firm maybe.
Now, this brings us to the end of Edgar Cayce. Now we're coming into the papal prophecies, the end of religion. And I'll get my esteemed colleague to introduce you to that, but I find these fascinating.
Papal prophecies, the end of religion. Saint Malachi? Is that correct?
Perfect.
Excellent. At 1094, November 2nd, 1148, was known as a great prophet. While in Rome in 1139, he received a vision showing him all the popes from his day to the end of time. According to these prophecies, only 2 popes remain after John Paul II. Saint Malachi was reported to have possessed the powers of levitation, healing, and clairvoyance. While on his way to the Vatican to assume the post of papal legate,
Yeah.
for Ireland, he fell. I can do that because I've got Irish heritage, so don't be offended. Crazy, I don't even know where it comes from when I say it. While on his way to the Vatican to assume his post as papal legate for Ireland, he fell into trance and saw a line of papal reigns stretching from the successor to Innocent II and extending through the centuries to the last of the line identified as Peter of Rome. Malachi assigned short descriptions in Latin to each pope when he committed his vision to paper. These, is that motes?
Yep.
Usually refer to a family name, maybe birthplace, coat of arms, or office held before election to the papacy. Some of the phrases are multiple prophecies written with indigenous wordplay. Through the centuries, his prophecies have turned out to be amazingly accurate, even prophesying the date of his own death. In all, 112 popes and their characteristics are listed from 1143 to the alleged end of the world. Alleged. Or perhaps religion as we know it ends, when truth is inlay revealed about human creation and destiny. Saint Malachi's final words were, "Rome, the seat of the Vatican, will be destroyed and the dreadful judge will judge the people." Prophecy of the Popes is a list of 112 short phrases in Latin. They purport to describe each of the Roman Catholic popes along with a few anti-popes, beginning with Pope Celestine II, elected in 1143, and concluding with a pope described in the prophecy as Peter the Roman, whose pontificate will end in the destruction of the city of Rome.
It's amazing, isn't it? Now, just as a little aside, I can't help myself. Pontifex actually means bridge builder. So the Pope is titled Pontifex, was meant to be a builder of bridges, meaning, of course, bridging the gulf between peoples with his teachings. Much has been lost. So we're going to go here through the last 10 popes
Please.
In order. Dave goes one, I go one, etc., etc. So Malachi's prophecies, the last 10 popes. The first of the last 10, the burning fire, Pius X, 1903 to 1914. This pope showed a burning passion for spiritual renewal in the church.
Number 2, religion laid waste, Benedict the 15th. In 1914 to 1922, during this pope's reign saw communism moved into Russia, where religious life was laid waste, and World War I, with the death of millions of Christians who were carnage in Flanders Field and elsewhere.
And the third, unshaken faith, Pius XI, 1922 to 1939. This pope faced tremendous pressure from fascist and sinister powers in Germany and Italy, but he was an outspoken critic of communism and fascism, which enraged Hitler.
Number 4, an angelic shepherd, Pius XII, 1939 to 1958. This pope had an affinity for the spiritual world and received visions which have not been made public. Peter Bander says Pius XII has emerged as one of the great popes of all time, and he was, in the truest sense of the word, an angelic pastor to the flock.
Nice. The fifth one, pastor and mariner, John the 23rd, 1958 to 1963. John was a pastor to the world, much beloved, and the patriarch of Venice. The connection to mariner is thus remarkable. Of course, Venice, the sea of bridges and much a maritime powerhouse.
Remember the dolphins came back, Mickey, when there was no people.
I know.
And instead of being muddy, because those darn sticks they used to get the people about in the water, just stir the bottom up. And when they all disappeared, it was amazing. Number 6, flowers of flowers. Flower of flowers. Paul VI. 1963 to 1978. Paul's coat of arms depicts 3 fleurs de lis, corresponding to Malachi's prophecy, his coat of arms included 3 fleurs de lis or iris blossoms.
7 of the half moon. John Paul I, who only reigned for 33 days in 1978, about 1 month, although many think he was murdered. He was the 109th Pope. It is the Meditate Lunae of the half moon. The corresponding Pope was John Paul I, 1978 again, who was born in the Diocese of Belluno, beautiful moon, and was baptized Albino Luciani, white light. He became Pope on August 26, 1978, when the moon appeared exactly half full. Exactly half full. It was in its waning phase. He died the following month, soon after an eclipse of the moon, which is really because the prophecy says he was of the half moon. So so the prophecy actually indicates, yes, that's when he came into power, but that's also how long he reigned, only for that 1 month.
Wow. So so that was it? No. Keep going. Did he die?
No, that's it.
Oh, right, cool. Number 8, the labour of the sun. John Paul II, 1978 to 2005. Pope John Paul II was the most travelled pope in history. He circled the globe numerous times, preaching to huge audiences everywhere he went. He survived in an assassination attempt. That's where the Pope Mobile with the dome came about. He's written a book which has enjoyed a large circulation. Like the sun, which never ceases to labour and provides light daily, this Pope has been incessant. He was born on May 18th, 1920. On that date in the morning, there was a near total eclipse of the sun over Europe. Prophecy, the 110th Pope, is de labor solis, of the solar eclipse, or from the toil of the sun. Like the sun, he came out of the east, which was Poland.
The glory of the olive, number 9 here, and this corresponds to Pope Benedict. Okay, that's where we are now, Pope Benedict. And this is crazy because the order of Saint Benedict has said this Pope will come from their order. It is interesting that Jesus gave his apocalyptic prophecy about the end of time from the Mount of Olives. This Pope will reign during the beginning of the tribulation Jesus spoke of. The 111th prophecy is Gloria Olivae, the glory of the olive. The order of Saint Benedict himself prophesied that before the end of the world, his order, known also as the Olivetans, will triumphantly lead the Catholic Church in its fight against evil. So this is Pope Benedict, who reigned for 7 years until 2013, which of course means, Dave, go ahead.
It's on the last Pope, isn't it?
He is.
Do you like that? I watched Lock, Stock and Two Smoking Barrels.
I love that movie. I love
me
that
too.
movie.
So number 10, Peter the Roman. This final Pope will likely be Satan. Taking the form of a man named Peter, who will gain a worldwide allegiance and adoration. He will be the final Antichrist, which prophecy students have long foretold. If it were possible, even the very elect would be deceived. The 112th prophecy states, in the final persecution of the Holy Roman Church, there will reign Petrus Romanus, who will feed his flock amid many tribulations, after which the 7-hilled city will be destroyed, and the dreadful judge will judge the people. The end. And the reason we've got the papal prophecies here, or St. Malachi's prophecies, is because we're living in the time of the last Pope. That's right.
And it's actually, obviously, Pope Francis that is now. And he's the 266th Pope overall.
Wow.
Now, what can we say?
Was he the Jesuit?
He's the Jesuit. He's the first Jesuit in 140 years or so.
And so So that also lines up with the Nostradamus one about the Black Pope,
Correct.
because the Jesuit is the Black Order.
That is absolutely correct. So he is. He's also the first that came from America, or from the Americas. He's actually South American. He's from Argentina. Look, his name is not Peter. It's not Peter, but again, Peter was the first pope, right? And Peter wasn't actually the name of the man who Jesus fingered to be the first pope. It was what? Oh, this is the time. Oh, come on! All right, more of this next week.
Well, you know what? Meckie's going to finish that sentence next week. And look, to be honest, we love you all. This is David Meckie's Shiny Side Out. Stay tuned for Jer Bear's awesome show, After Hours. Take part in his show. Give him a call in, or at least chat to him in the chat room while it's on air. Take care, everyone. We'll see you next week.